PSC. It's great to have so many PSC members avail themselves of this workshop. I want to first start by thanking Paul Bartlett, who's an adjunct faculty member at John Jay College, for helping to pull this together, and also to thank Carolina and Megan and everybody else who's been participating in this information session. It's really important, and I'm going to just give a very brief plug for the role that higher education unions, including ours, have played in bringing us to this point where eligibility for public service loan forgiveness has been expanded dramatically. And it's worth just taking a step back and taking in, because I know we're going to get into the concrete practical steps, and that's important. And I think just from a political frame, it's really important for us to take in how much advocacy had to go into first expanding and making public service loan forgiveness kind of live up to its initial intended promise, which during the Trump administration with Betsy DeVos as the education secretary was like a graveyard for these applications. And it took concerted effort, and our national affiliate, the AFT, was at the forefront of this. Give them a lot of credit for this. Not until fall 2021. I mean, initially there was like 1 or 2% of loan applications were getting approved, of eligible loans. And finally in fall of 2021, things started to turn around, and it took a lawsuit with AFT President Randy Weingarten as the lead plaintiff and 7 others to prevail in this suit and to try to remove the impediments and roadblocks that had led to the kind of bottleneck where single digits of people were being approved. And so that's what led to the so-called Biden waiver, that we're still within the window, just barely, and maybe it'll get extended. But for now, we have this so-called Biden waiver, which was really to rectify that bottleneck in the initial years, and made eligibility restrictions, removed the restrictions, and allowed what you're going to hear more about, and I'm sure you have already, about the opportunity to consolidate loans and to submit an application by October 31st of this year, which is rapidly approaching. And I'll just say one thing more, even though it's not directly relevant to full-time faculty and staff, which is the frame for tonight's session. It's really exciting that in New York State, through lots of advocacy, including PSC and including NYSET, our statewide affiliate, the governor is very close to signing legislation that's going to expand eligibility to adjunct faculty teaching a minimum threshold of contact hours each year. So it's a way of defining full-time employment that accounts for the fact that adjunct faculty do work that's not confined strictly to their contact hours in the classroom. And so there's a formula for that. So it's potentially really transformative, not only for full-timers as classically defined, but also within New York State, can contemplate the eccentric way, really, in which many of our adjunct faculty at SUNY and CUNY teach something like full-time, despite being defined, within their employment as being part-time employees. So, and I believe that it looks like the governor that passed the House and the Senate, and the governor seems poised to sign that bill within the next week. So we're excited to be able to offer these workshops, not only for full-timers, but fingers still crossed, but we have every reason to believe it's going to happen also for part-timers. So I think that's all that I wanted to say. And again, thank everybody who's here. Hope it's beneficial. I'm excited that this is coming to fruition. And again, thank Paul and Carolina and Megan for their work on preparing this. So Paul, I'll hand it back over to you.
Okay, thanks a lot. James Davis, President of PSC. For those of you that have just signed on recently, I put the agenda back up on the chat. And I think captioning, there's something you can click that gives you captioning. And if I can just break away, I saw a question about that. We do have live transcript enabled, so captioning should be available. We're going to switch to Megan O'Brien from NYSET. NYSET has been holding these webinars that have been invaluable for PSC CUNY full-time and part-time faculty. And so she's not going to give the full webinar. Megan's just going to give us a small overview, and we encourage people that haven't done the webinar from NYSET to do so. The next one is September 15th. And there's other EdCap and other organizations also have webinars and information available. So Megan's going to give an overview. And this webinar, we're really going to concentrate on employment verification from CUNY HR. That's what this is going to be about for full-time only. We'll work with part-time adjunct on Monday on the 12th. Okay, so go ahead. And thanks so much. We really appreciate Megan O'Brien coming in a very busy schedule and not taking vacation during this time.
No, I'm not taking any vacation until the waiver period closes, or if it gets extended, I might take a vacation. So Paul and James, thank you so much for inviting me to participate this evening. So as Paul said, my name is Megan O'Brien, and my job title for NYSET, I'm actually the organizing manager. I've been coordinating NYSET's student debt programs, working in partnership with Cambridge Credit Counseling for a little over 2 years now. It kind of falls under the other duties as assigned. As one is a union activist, you wear a lot of different hats. So, and this has been one of mine. So I'm going to just share my screen here really quickly. And what I'm hoping folks see on the screen is a PowerPoint presentation. If someone, James, I still see you. Could you just raise your hand and make sure that I've got a PowerPoint? Excellent. Thank you so much. So as mentioned, so NYSET has been, as part of our member benefits programs, offering various types of student counseling workshops, probably for about 3 years now overall. But one that has really kind of come to the forefront that we've been working with a group known as Cambridge Credit Counseling. And before I kind of dive into the specifics of this, I want to just speak a little bit about student debt generally. I think we've heard enough. I mean, all of us know that this is a crisis issue. That's why PSC is involved. That's why NYSET has been involved. This is why the AFT has been so active in this issue. But something that I have seen during my involvement in working with our members on this program is that there can be a lot of shame associated with the idea of student debt. And, you know, I just kind of want to make the point that all of us on this webinar, I would imagine, had to take on some debt in order to get the credentials and the educations and the degrees that they have in order to have the professions they do. Lord knows I certainly had to. And I've just found that with, again, some of our members who might have been the first in their families, maybe not for college, but the first to go on to graduate school, the first to go into an academic career, there can be kind of a lot of pushback and a little bit of shaming sometimes from friends and loved ones on, well, why did you need that second master's and why did you do this? So I just want to put it out there. There's lots of external forces for why people's debt loads for their education are the way it is. And very, very little bit is because of personal blame. So I just want to kind of put that out there first. You know, as James mentioned, you know, this has been public service loan forgiveness not just public service loan forgiveness, but frankly, how the private loan servicers whom the Department of Education has contracted with for decades, um, just the fraud, bad information, sloppy work, setting aside loan forgiveness, what it should be, on the number of our members who have frankly dealt with, higher interest rates than they should have, payments not being credited, a lot of issues out there. So, as mentioned, AFT has really taken the lead, I think, on this issue from a labor perspective. And they actually instigated a lawsuit against our Department of Education and the previous administration, Weingarten versus DeVos. And the settlement for this lawsuit, in addition to President Biden's waiver of some of the public service loan forgiveness rules, have just made a sea change in who is eligible for this program. So, this really expands the program to include folks who have what are known as FFL, Federal Family Education Loans. They were excluded from the program before. Folks who have Perkins loans, different types of loans were excluded. Reconsideration for people who have already been denied public service loan forgiveness. So the impacts of our current administration, spurred on, frankly, I believe, by this lawsuit, have been tremendous. But the window is closing. And right now, I joke, don't turn into a pumpkin, because the window for this enhanced loan forgiveness closes on October 31st of this year. So I want to talk about one more thing before I design a program. Now more than ever, and it's really disturbing to me, the number of our members who are getting these kinds of cold call solicitations and outreach. You'll see them on social media. Your students are probably getting them even. You might even get calls at your home, solicitations, loan relief companies out there who are going to charge you a fee up front, who are going to want to charge you a percentage of what your loan debt is. And the reality is they're either not going to do anything and take your money, or they're going to file paperwork that you could file on your own with a little bit of assistance at no cost to yourself. So please, I know that Carolina runs a fantastic program. She'll speak to that. Again, we partner with Cambridge Credit Counseling, which is a not-for-profit based in Massachusetts. Make sure you're using a reputable source for your assistance on this. So what does NYSET offer as your state union affiliate? So we have a program that offers a few services. First of all, we have a series of webinars. My next slide, I'll show the upcoming dates. And actually, I dropped in the chat the link to register for webinars, and you can see the dates that are available there. So the first thing is a webinar, and that's presented by several folks who do student loan counseling for a living. And have coordinated their respective programs. Also, the opportunity to schedule a free counseling session with a student loan counselor. This has proven to be a really invaluable resource for our folks. Again, many of our members have very complicated loan situations. It's not all that straightforward. And this assistance has been very helpful. Also, access to a student loan portal. This can be a helpful tool, if you think you're getting your information together, because what you're really going to need are the types of loans you have, who your loan servicer is, going to the portal and kind of walking through that and seeing the questions and seeing the information you need and how to get it can be an excellent first step before you meet with a counselor. And honestly, you might not need to meet with a counselor, because what the portal will do is move you in the right direction. So if you have a straightforward loan situation, that's something that might be a good resource for you. So again, I keep mentioning Cambridge Credit Counseling. I don't cheerlead a lot for member benefits. I don't think that's the primary focus of why people are in unions and join unions, but I cheerlead for this program and these guys. So like I said, we've been working with Cambridge for a couple years now, and they've also really, as a not-for-profit, been at kind of the forefront of a lot of the work with dealing with for-profit scam colleges and trade schools, and working for loan forgiveness for that population, working with our members. They work with our union brothers and sisters in Massachusetts, K-12 and higher ed also. And so the webinars are presented by Marty Lynch and Todd Friedhaber, who direct the program there. Each webinar is about an hour and a half. They are not short. They can be a bit dense. These guys are experts and I love them. They've never met a tangent that they don't enjoy. So I try and keep them on track as the facilitator of the webinars, and we get them out in about an hour and a half and we do some questions. And for some folks that's enough. If it's not enough, again, you can, go on and sign up for individual counseling or use the portal. This is the webinar schedule coming up. So we do have 5 coming up between now and when the window closes on October 31st. Now, I ask these guys every time, hey, have you heard anything about the waiver period being extended? Carolina, feel free to chime in if you've got better intel than I do, but I have not heard, they have not heard of it being extended. Yeah, you're shaking your head. That this might be the last gasp of this particular waiver in this program extension. So again, the link to sign up for webinars, I did drop it in the chat. Where's my next slide? Here is the student loan portal, what it looks like. Again, studentloans.nicet.org. That'll take you to a broad page. So you'll have the portal, the webinars, sign up for an individual counseling session if you want to do that. And again, so scheduling a free follow-up session with a student loan counselor. Now, because nothing in life is easy, unfortunately, NICET's database and PSC's database do not always talk to each other perfectly when it comes to memberships. So I've also dropped my email in the chat. If you think you're going to want an individual session, email me directly. I will send you your NICET membership number so that you can register for an appointment. You will need your membership number to do so. This evening, I plan on watching the Bills game and finding people their NICET membership numbers. So if you email me, I will probably get back to you at some point tonight. But again, you will need that to do this program. So something I want to touch base for a few things. I just want to talk about, we keep talking about the waiver and PSLF, and so what it is with the waiver. And again, Carolina, feel free to jump in if I am misspeaking on any of this. So last October, the Biden administration really opened up the public service loan forgiveness program in a very meaningful way. More types of loans were accepted. Again, folks who had been previously disqualified because they had Perkins loans or older loans, different types of loans, were suddenly a part of this program. So, I want to put this out now. Many of you may need to consolidate your loans. The first thing I think you do, if this process is new to you, really go to studentaid.gov, find out what types of loans you have, and if you need to, start the consolidation process. And start it now, because you may have to do that before you can apply for PSLF. The advice that I am being given is that, again, as we're getting down to the wire, it's now September 8th, or less than 60 days. Start your consolidation process. Consolidation's taking a while. It may take, more than 60 days to get that consolidation done. You can still apply for PSLF. The advice is if your loans are in the process of being consolidated, do still apply for PSLF. And go forward with that. And Carolina, I'm assuming you're going to talk a little bit more about that, but that is the advice that we are giving our members at this point for this, because we are getting so close to the deadline. So again, as mentioned, federal Perkins loans, other types of federal student loans now do qualify, but again, you've got to consolidate them. Now, when you consolidate them, you're not starting from scratch. Your 120 payments in these other types of loans now qualify. Under the old rules, in a lot of cases, you did have to start over again. So that is not the case now. Something else to think about, and this may apply to some folks who are on the webinar tonight. If you already tried to apply for PSLF previously and were rejected, try again. Also think about, a lot of folks get hung up on, well, I haven't been at CUNY for 10 years. I haven't been in education for 10 years. Public service loan forgiveness also applies to folks who work for not-for-profits, who've worked for the federal government, who've worked, the UN qualifies as a not-for-profit employer. It's a pretty broad net. The only thing that doesn't really qualify are the types of not-for-profits, ironically, labor union staff, not that I'm bitter, and folks who've worked for direct political organizations. So, you know, a lobbying firm or something like that would not necessarily qualify. But if you have done not-for-profit work in the past, if you did a stint in the Peace Corps, if you had a previous career or life in K-12 education or other types of nonprofit or social justice work, that counts as employment. So think about that as you're looking at putting together 10 years. The other thing I just wanted to touch on very quickly is Paul asked me to speak a little bit about kind of NYSIT member benefits in general. So as mentioned, NYSIT, New York State United Teachers, we are your state affiliate, state union affiliate. And, you know, I would encourage folks to take a look at what other types of member benefits might be available or accessible to you if you haven't done so already. Again, all of these things are a part of your union membership with NYSIT. So memberbenefits.nysit.org. Cambridge, again, is our endorsed provider for student loan counseling assistance. We also have had a number of members who have used this program also follow up and utilize their debt consolidation and counseling services, and some of their other credit counseling work. They're tremendous. We've had nothing but really positive feedback from the work they've done. The worst I've heard back is, you know, I couldn't get in touch with a counselor in time, or I missed my appointment, and they're excellent following up and rescheduling. So again, take a look at memberbenefits.nysit.org, and again, do sign up for a webinar as soon as possible. Okay, Paul, thank you. That is all I had. I will stop my share. Are there any other points that you wanted me to mention before I turn it over to Carolina?
I'd like to turn over to Carolina. I think there's been some questions in chat that Carolina has graciously responded to, and maybe you can do the same while she's talking.
Sure.
I wanted to introduce you to Carolina Rodriguez from EdCap, which is, she's from Community Service Society, which is an amazing organization. I worked with them in Jobs Coalition 2000, which is way before 2000, and can only say good things about them. So the groups that we have endorsed for you to go to include EdCap and a group called PSLF.NYC. As Megan warned you, there's a lot of scammers out there charging to do this. This is not a fun process to go through, but it's worth the effort. And I'm not convinced that somebody else from the outside can actually do any better than you can. So I'm gonna have Carolina to kind of pick up on certain things that she's found important. She's also had CUNY people coming to the EdCap. One mention is we do have, let's say, union members are eligible for the NYSET resources, but non-union employees are not, don't have NYSET ID numbers, so you can't get the counseling sessions. Or same with AFT resources that are on our website. But everybody can go to EdCat. And EdCat has recorded interviews recorded webinars, and then you can do live followed by well, anyways, you can do the live followed by Q&A. So the Q&A is obviously different for every session. And thanks for putting your information and put up your website up there. And we have, at PSC, we have a really great website put together by Fran Clark. And a lot of you have already been there, but I'll put that up in chat too. Carolina picks up some important problems that CUNY members have had.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Megan, for having me. So I just want to highlight a couple of things. And the big step that you want to do as soon as possible, as mentioned and emphasized, is if you have FFELP or Perkins loans, you want to consolidate them as soon as possible, because I am sure that there's going to be a ton of people, and the current administration at FSA already said that they're being inundated. So you want to get that consolidation in The second reason, aside from PSLF, of why you want to consolidate FEL or Perkins is if you may qualify for the latest cancellation announcement and you have FEL or Perkins loans, you would need to consolidate them in order to make them eligible. So now there are two reasons why people should go ahead and just consolidate them. The other point I want to make is that you no longer have to wait for the consolidation to go through in order for you to submit the forms. And the key form is just one form. It's an employer form that you have every employer you've had since 2007 complete to verify your employment and track your qualifying payments. So the big takeaway there is you can submit the consolidation today. And if you have those forms, you can go ahead and submit them to Mojilla, which is the servicer managing the PSLF program at this point. So don't wait, just go ahead and submit it. You do, however, want to make sure that if you're faxing them, you have a record of that fax. If you're going to mail them, that you keep hopefully a record of that mailing. Mojilla might not get back to you acknowledging they received the form. So I would give them 3 to 4 weeks after submission to potentially call them up. Obviously, if you're doing any of this closer to the deadline, you want to make sure you have proof that you submitted the forms to get in and benefit from the waiver. As Paul mentioned, my program is completely free. We say we are free and unbiased, and we have your best interest in mind. And we do offer free one-on-one counseling sessions. Our counseling sessions are usually an hour. Right now, we're doing 30-minute sessions in order to get everyone in. But we're happy to obviously help anyone who needs a little bit more help and guidance, whether it's on PSLF or just strategy, right? Like, we have clients right now coming to us trying to pick our brains on like, well, how does cancellation apply? Or what about if I had a borrower defense to repayment? How does that connect with PSLF? What about if I have defaulted loans? Should I be doing anything to meet the October deadline? So we are able to, again, be able to have that conversation with you and have a strategy and obviously guide you through any process. I am happy to pass the mic to someone else. If you guys have any specific questions, obviously we'll get to the Q&A. I'll be happy to answer them. And again, we put the contact information for EdCap in the chat in case you want to benefit from those resources. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carolina. And Carolina and Megan have been so much help for me to understand the process. And it is very complicated. You really just have to go through it. But the highlight is start the consolidation process. It doesn't have to finish before the deadline, but you have to have started it. And you'll have to have submitted an employment verification form to be considered an app up in the application process and have the timestamp before October 31st. And that's what I'm going to move into. Carolina, I put a question that came in up in Q&A and I put it in the chat. That was anonymous, and maybe you can respond to that in chat. And I'm going to start with my part of the presentation, and that's the employment verification form. So basically, at CUNY, our HR campus, our HRs at the campuses are actually autonomous from CUNY Central. And of course, we have over 20 campuses. So we don't really know what's going on at every campus. So some people have had, oh, thanks about the camera. Some people have had problems with their HR offices and that are hopefully historic and have been corrected. And others have had a very smooth process. So what we'd like to do is get some feedback now if you are having any trouble. So at the PSC, we did talk to CUNY Central, and there is an HR person at CUNY Central. There are HR staff, but they provide what they say is guidance to the campuses. And then we have an executive director of benefits that is also helping with this process. And we just recently discovered they're planning a webinar on the 15th at 10 a.m. So that should give some updates of what's happening there. But for full-timers, applying for employment verification is fairly straightforward. The problems we really expect is going to be for part-timers, or if you're full-time and you want to apply for employment verification for periods that you have been an adjunct, please come to our information webinar on the 12th at 6:15 p.m. I'm going to share my screen, and I just have to move things around to get the right thing up there. And sorry. So I'm going to put the actual form up that you have to fill out. And this is where I want the reason, one of the reasons Megan and Carolina are here is to help me if I make any mistakes. They're familiar of much more experience and trouble people have had. So let me do the share screen. I have a little trouble because I have a tiny screen and a big screen. Okay, so you should now see the actual employment form. And I'm pretty sure we have I'll put a link up in chat after I'm done, or maybe somebody else can do that while I'm talking about this. I basically put this on a Google Drive and made it open access. So the first section is pretty straightforward. But the second section, so you're required to do section 1 and 2. After talking to CUNY Central, our impression is it's better that you also fill out section 3, which is employer information, and it can be completed by both, by either one, but you're less likely to get a mistake if you fill it out. So question 2, they basically did not revise this form when the Biden waivers came in. So the wording may not really feel accurate. So one of the questions in the chat is the person has not finished all 120 payments. So if you have filled out the 120 payments, you check the second box, and you want them to evaluate. And that means you've had the 10 years of service and 120 payments. Now, under the Biden waivers, the forbearance period that we got under COVID counts as payment periods. And then there are other tricky payments. For instance, if you were a graduate student and you had payments made by an NIH grant, those count. So more payments count. And I think also because if you have many different loans that you've consolidated, I believe all the payment periods from all the loans count. Now, the problem is for those of us that have not finished our 120 payments or 10 years of service, then you would click the top box if I understand correctly. Is that right, Carolina and Megan?
Yes, if you feel like you have not completed the 10 years and you just want to get an estimate, you can just check off the first box. Honestly, if you check the first box or second box, they should still process it and you should be okay. I put in the chat the link to 2 ways how you can generate the form, which is the PSLF help tool and the paper form as well. Great.
So also when we talk to HR CUNY Central, they can't say that these are all the campus's preferences, but I believe they preferred us to email PDFs. And then what they do is they sign the form, hopefully, and then email it back to you. There's also, of course, the option of fax, but of course, and I'm not sure how that is on every campus. But I've heard that paper can be slower. Paper can end up sitting on somebody's desk and not processed, but it may vary by campus. But also, I think I've been told if you submit paper to DOE that it might be a slower process. And also, actually Megan or Carlina, you could put in chat, there is a way to generate, to apply online using a W-2 form.
We dropped that in. Yep.
Oh, okay, great. So, so here's section 3. It's fairly straightforward for full-timers. I'm going to put in the FEINs. Basically, we have an EIN for community colleges and then a separate one for the 4-year colleges. And then, so you do the beginning date and click either still employed or end date if you have retired. Or now you have to fill out a form for every employer you've had. So if you're full-time now, which is what this is for, it's fairly straightforward, but you probably, a lot of you have had periods of employment, possibly as an adjunct or other type of nonprofit eligible public service. So you have to do a form for each. And then if you have somewhat irregular semesters, you again may have to do for each. So we recommend those people to come to our form on the 12th, where we can get more into that, because for those forms, we would ask if it's for adjunct service, we recommend holding off submitting those forms to Department of Education until after the bill is signed by HOCL. So basically, I assume we're considered a governmental organization. Is that correct? Yeah, or college or university. And then they fill out section 4. And so it should be straightforward, but we would like to know if anyone has had any trouble with these. And while I pause to see if anyone has. Let's see.
So there was someone in the chat that noted that they had issues with the PSLF tool. So the PSLF tool is the online way to generate the form, and it requires that you input the employer's EIN, which should be the same one for everyone. And the problem was that it was not bringing up the correct address. So my takeaway, given the deadline, is if the tool is not working out for you because it's giving you the wrong information, go ahead and use the paper form. And if you have any questions, just remember, technically you should only be completing the first page, but if you want to help your employer expedite the process, you want to put in as much information on the second page, which is the employer page, so to speak. So yeah, I would say if the PSLF help tool is giving you a hard time, just go with the PDF version, and that may be easier or faster, I should say.
Yeah, I guess the one comment I have on that is when we talked to CUNY Central, we talked about potential problems and mistakes, and I put the EIN in there. You do not submit anything to CUNY Central. You submit to your campus HR. And I put the EINs in the chat. I didn't hear about the employer address thing. I'll try to find out what the correct address is for each EIN. So the EIN is not going to be for your campus. That will be CUNY-wide, either community college. But you are, it is your campus HR that will be filling this out. So when we talked about the potential problems that we want to prevent, we agreed, talking to CUNY Central, it'd be helpful to have a cover letter where you put all your information, like your CUNY ID number in there. You put the dates you started at the campus that you did, that you're applying to, the department you teach in, or departments if you teach in multiple departments. That's been an issue in the past. So you put all the information you can in the cover letter, and then fill out the section 3. But you don't have to do section 3. So that is optional. So are there any other problems? So yeah, Central, we're hoping that we'll get Luke, who's the chair of the legislative committee and also on the executive board of PSC, and I talked to CUNY Central, and they didn't really sound very prepared. This is our worry, that they have enough staff to process and get the forms back in time. But there's a positive development in the fact that they're sponsoring their own webinar on next Thursday on the 15th, and they actually contracted EdCap to do this, so which is where Carlina Rodriguez works for. So we have a lot of confidence in EdCap, so we think that's a good movement. But what we would like is for our HR offices to do the employer webinars, so they know how to handle everything correctly. And so we will try to talk to CUNY Central again about that. When we talked to them, they had no written guidance to the campuses. But when we talked about how do you know who to contact at HR, they didn't really know on the campuses. So we talked about them creating an email Dropbox that would say PSLF-HR- College or something. And they thought that would be a good idea and they'd implement it, but I've seen no signs that that's been implemented. The other, I hate to bring this up, but let's say there's a possibility that they don't return the form in time till October 31st. We don't really know what to do about that. We have played around with the idea that there is a box that you can check. Let me see where it is. When your employer has not responded. And let's see, where is that? Oh, that's up here. That's in section 2. We're not sure about this and something to get back to. So if you're not getting it back in time, contact us. And or actually what we'll do is we'll put something up on our website, webpage on PSLF. But right now, the only thing I can think of is that you check this box and say the organization has refused to certify your employment. And that will get you in the time. What we're worried about is getting in the timestamp before October 31st. So that's probably the best thing to do if they don't return the form in time. So I'm going to stop now. And because it's only 5:46, we'll first take questions about the employment or comments from Carolina and Megan on the employment form. And then after that, a Q&A on the employment form. And then after that, we can open up general Q&A.
Paul, real quickly, because I saw this question in the chat and it probably comes up. If folks are going to need more than one employer, a CUNY and a second employer to get to your 10 years, and remember that time doesn't need to be consecutive. You do need an employer verification for each employer. That is required. So you're going to have to do this more than once if you're getting it from an additional employer other than CUNY.
And added into that, unfortunately, if you have different hours during different semesters or periods with different employers, you have to have a separate form for each of those periods that have different hours. And so the goal is to get them to add up to 30 hours. And if you are both part-time, we're part-time and full-time now, the part-time multiplier is 3.35 times the contact hour for CUNY. But if you taught at a different school, we would say just go ahead and use 10 hours per course, 3-credit course approximately, and fill out the form yourself. I also teach at Fordham University, and that's what I plan to do with Fordham. So more questions. I see other questions in the chat. If you deferred or were in forbearance for a period of time, will those amounts count as well? And
Yeah,
if they,
I was trying to type in and then I typed in the O and like created a mess. So that's a really good question. So in general, what the government is doing right now under the waiver, they're looking at your repayment history. And obviously, if you were in repayment and you were working full-time for a qualifying employer or part-time with an average of 30 hours, they will give you credit for that time period. However, there's this thing called the IDR adjustment. That's not going to happen, however, until like next year, middle of next year. They pushed it back where they may give you credit for time you spend in forbearances. And if you had a deferment prior to 2013, there's some specific rules. So all that to say, you want to get all the paperwork in on time, and it's going to take the government at least a couple, 2 to 3 different review periods for you to finally know how many qualifying payments you have. If you've had a lot of forbearances, for example, you may benefit from that IDR adjustment, and I'll try to put a link in there in the chat. The IDR adjustment says that if you were in forbearance for 12 consecutive months or 36 cumulative months, you get credit for that. But even if you don't meet that rule, there will be an opportunity for you to dispute that and try to see if you can get credit for those forbearances. Again, that's being done later on automatically under the IDR adjustment initiative.
there's another question here that somebody says it showed to send in the form to USDOE in Harrisburg, but now
Yeah,
I'm
so
online.
that has changed. If you had loans with Fed Loan, you were sending them, or even if you didn't, you were sending the forms to Fed Loan. As of now, you should be sending them to Mojilla. So if you look at the chat and pull up, actually, Paul, if you scroll down to section 7 of the form, this should be the new form. And we recommend that when you're sending this form, you should send it to Mojilla both by mail and fax. If Mojilla is your servicer, you can just upload the form on your account through Mojilla, and that's probably the best way. But if Mojilla is not your servicer yet, you're gonna mail it. There it is. You're gonna mail it. Instructions are in section 7. And I recommend doing both, mail it and fax it, just to be on the safe side. Again, if Mojilla is your servicer, you can just upload it. Now, a key thing about this form, eventually your loans need to end up with Mojilla, right? And there are 2 ways to get your loans to Mojilla. One of them is that you do a consolidation, and when you select the servicer, you select Mojilla, so Mojilla will eventually get them. The second way is that if you submit one of these forms and you have qualifying loans and qualifying employment, Mojilla is going to reach out to your servicer. It could be Great Lakes, it could be Nelnet, for example. They'll reach out to your servicer and get your loans in order to then do the review for PSLF and give you a payment count. So there's a little bit of movement there, but eventually, one way or another, you need to get your loans to Mojilla. You cannot proactively call Mojilla and say, take over my loans. That can only happen if you consolidate or if you submit an employment certification form. So let me see. It's actually a little bit easier if folks put the questions in the Q&A versus the chat. There was a question about the correct address for City of New York office on 42nd Street or using the specific campus. Paul, I don't know if you have any insight into whether they should be using one address or the other. Honestly, I've never seen a form get rejected because of the address. I think you could go with your campus address and you should be fine if that's your way of doing it. But I don't know if anyone else has any insight on to whether to use the main office address or the campus address.
So we'll check on the address question and put that up on our webpage.
Great. There's a really good question about like having multiple loans already serviced by Mojilla and whether you need to consolidate them. If all your loans are direct loans, technically you don't need to consolidate them because they're eligible as they are, as long as they're direct. There's only one potential benefit to consolidating direct loans. And I'm going to try to explain it in a way that makes sense. if you had undergrad loans, for example, and you went out and worked for a qualifying employer and you maybe worked a couple of years, and then you went to grad school, even though you may have direct loans, if you consolidate them all, then all your loans are gonna get the highest payment count attached to all of them. So for example, if I went to undergrad, worked for 5 years in the nonprofit, I would have 5 years on my undergrad loans. But if I recently graduated and took out grad loans, I would have to start from scratch, so to speak, on those grad loans. Right now, even if they're all direct, you can consolidate them all as long as you do it by the deadline. And then all of the loans would acquire the 5-year count. So that's like kind of like, I don't want to say a loophole, but an extra perk of the waiver that they're allowing you to consolidate, and you'll get the highest payment count applied to the whole loan balance. Now, I do want to mention this because it comes up at every presentation I have. If you have Parent Plus loans, I need you to reach out to us because Parent Plus loans were excluded from the waiver, and it requires a completely different conversation. That is, if you have Parent Plus loans, again, it would take me a whole session for me to describe the ins and outs of Parent Plus and how they're treated differently and what we would need to do.
Carolina, just to chime in on that, there is a very narrow way that a Parent Plus loan can be forgiven if the person carrying the Parent Plus loan is also carrying their own student loans. But I am, as you're nodding your head, I am not going to pretend to have the expertise to get into it concisely right now. So again, reach out to Carolina, or we do address that on the NYSET webinar, the long form presentation.
Yes, there is another, like, again, I don't want to use the word loophole, another like benefit if people have Parent Plus along with their own loans that we could leverage to hopefully give you a good outcome, but it requires that one-on-one assessment because there's consequences to consolidating. If you have still a long time to repay, you're only eligible for the ICR plan and it's more expensive. That's why I say, like, just reach out because it can get really complicated with Parent Plus. There was a question in the Q&A about mailing and faxing. I'm just kind of like one of those people that it's like, I want to be on the safe side. I want to mail it just in case the fax didn't go through right or there were errors. One thing we haven't mentioned, it has to be wet signature. So don't forget to sign your own form, page 1, and date it, and your employer review the information. If there are errors, you want to catch them before submitting the form because you don't want to be waiting for weeks only to find out that it wasn't dated or that the information was not legible. Common mistakes people make is the employer signs and dates the form, but they forget to fill out the rest of the information, or the information is not legible. Like the title of the person should be legible, their phone number, because in case they need to verify any of the information provided, and it's not that they're gonna like nitpick on the information. They'll take the information at face value, but if they're questioning who signed it, they want to be able to reach back out and confirm that information. So you want to make sure that, again, it's a wet signature. You don't have to submit original signatures. So if I send in the form and I get it back with a real signature, I just need a copy of that to send out. Again, I am that type of person that I say mail and fax, but either way, as long as you have proof that you've sent it one way, you should be okay.
And I would add email to that. Email it or submit it on the website.
If you have
can't.
Mojilla. Yeah.
But this is the new information for me on the Mojilla, so
yeah,
I
so
appreciate that.
Yeah, there's a question about when you're doing the consolidation, it's gonna ask you if you want to delay processing, and the answer is no. You want to say do not delay processing, right? Because you want the application to go through immediately.
I'm
I'm
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I need to apologize. I need to hop off and go to another webinar. So just as a reminder, folks, my email is in the chat. Do contact me if you need your NYSET member ID. I've been actually responding to a few folks on email as we're doing this. I will get back to you with your number tonight. Paul, thank you so much for letting me participate. Carolina, you are a wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much. Okay, good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night, Megan, and we
Thank you,
really
Megan.
appreciate all the help.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
So there's a question about, I applied for consolidation, should I wait for the part-time service? So this is kind of like the part-time adjunct. If you're an adjunct professor, there's gonna be a webinar next week. But the general advice is that if you're just a staff, you should complete those forms and submit it as soon as possible, right? If you submitted the consolidation, submit them now. You can write a little note to Mojilla saying, I consolidated on such date and attach are my PSLF forms. For adjunct professors, actually for the person to type that, clarify whether you're an adjunct professor and then we can talk about it. Again, for part-time work, you have to average 30 hours per week. And it has to be from qualifying employer. So if you're working at the university and then on a nonprofit, or if you have 2 jobs at 2 different universities and average 30 hours, you should be fine. Can Mojilla take over the direct loans that are in deferment from Nelnet, or do you wait for repayment to apply to Mojilla to take over? So again, if the intent is for Mojilla to get your loans, either it's going to be done through a consolidation, or it's going to be done by filing the form that it's showing up on your screen, the PSLF form. If you're still in school, you cannot pressure the loans that you're currently using to pay for school to enter repayment. However, if you have other loans that are not paying for your current degree, you can trigger those loans to get out of deferment. And then you can either, if you need to consolidate them, you can consolidate them, or you can submit the PSLF form and get those loans started on the PSLF payment cap. I hope that makes sense. If it does not, just reach out to us. We can clarify or talk about it in your specific case. Let me see. So I consolidated in August 27. I was told not to submit it. No, the new advice is just submit it. So I would just submit it. Do not wait for the consolidation to go through. Again, if you want to be on the safe side, you want to put a note that you consolidated and provide the date. And that should be good enough. I would submit it. Worst case scenario, you resubmit, but I would not wait. I believe consolidation could also lead to lower payments in your remaining payments. Is this correct? No, not necessarily. When you consolidate, things stay pretty much status quo. The only thing, however, if you have FFELP loans or Perkins, if you consolidate them, then you're eligible for more generous repayment plan options. So that is technically correct if we're interpreting it that way. That when you have the older loans, you're restricted to like the higher payments because you're not eligible for the newer payment plans. And remember, the government might be releasing a new income-driven repayment plan. So that's another thing that I want to point out. And it's a lot of information, so I don't want to get you overwhelmed. Join one of the PSLF webinars if you need more information. But just remember, after October 31st, in order to continue accumulating payments towards the 120, you need to have your payments be done or made under an income-driven repayment plan. Income-driven is the umbrella, and there are 4 repayment plans right now under that umbrella. It's revised pay-as-you-earn, income-based repayment, which sounds very similar to IDR, but that's called IBR, and income contingent repayment. So just know that at one point, focus on consolidating and getting the application through. But if you don't select an income-driven repayment plan when you consolidate, you want to make sure that you do so before arguably October, and definitely before payments resume to continue accumulating credit or payments towards the 120. So I am a full-timer since 2017 and was part-time 2008 and through 2017. I have applied. Yeah, so if you were part-time during that period, I would probably wait to do the part-time certification to make sure. So for the bill, the bill that is pending, I'm assuming some of you already know what it does. It says that if you average 30 hours, and those 30 hours for those who teach are going to be multiplied for every class hour instruction times 3.35 or 37, don't quote me on it. But anyways, if you average from that multiplier 30 hours, that equals full-time. So all that to say, if you're in that situation where you would benefit from the bill being signed, I would wait for that because you don't want to submit a form and then have to resubmit it and create confusion to FSA. How do I know my application was received? So you'll know if your consolidation went through because it will tell you that your consolidation went through. In terms of the PSLF form, that's the problem and that's the anxiety I have, that Mojilla is overwhelmed and they're not necessarily communicating and saying, hey, we got your PSLF form. So my tip on that would be, if you submitted it, I would wait 3 to 4 weeks, obviously if you're closer to the deadline, and call Mojilla and say, I want to make sure you got my forms. And the other thing that I would do that I've said already is make sure you keep a copy of the fax that you sent in, obviously a copy of the forms. And if you're really, really nervous, you can always do like some type of certified mailing or like the little receipt that you get for like under $5 at the post office. But again, that is a concern. Now, once your loans are with Mojilla, out of precaution, you can just go ahead and upload them again if you want to be on the safe side. Do payments under standard repayment plan count for PSLF? During the waiver, they'll count any payment made under any repayment plan up until October. After the October deadline, only payments made on the 10-year standard repayment plan are going to count. So if you have consolidated loans, your new standard repayment plan is not the 10-year necessarily. It might be a 20 to 25-year. So that would not count as a PSLF payment. So only the 10-year standard repayment would continue to count for PSLF. But remember, if you're enrolled in the standard 10-year plan, technically you would be done paying the loans before you reach any forgiveness. The signature cannot be digital. It has to be, I should say, it cannot be a digital signature as we were seeing during COVID. It can be like drawn with the mouse or like a pen pad, but my advice is just to have a wet signature, like literally like a pen. If you're doing it yourself, you could literally sign a white piece of paper, take a picture of that, and then if you have PDF abilities, insert that signature and that should be fine. But in general, it has to be like a handwritten signature. I would not play around with a pad and online. Again, it definitely cannot be an electronic signature. Do full-time professors need question 8 answer? Is family medical leave deducted from time work? So what is question 8? So the hours
per week.
Yeah, you still have to answer it, but then the form would say on number 7 full-time, and you would just give your average hours per week. Usually the university will have what they consider like the full-time, but it could be like full-time 30 hours, and that should be fine. Time away on leave and medical leave and maternity leave should count, and that's because your employer still has you on their records as being an employee. So that time should count. And when the employer goes to fill out the form, I would assume that they're just going to account for the fact that you were an employee versus like the specific status at that point. So once the consolidation is complete, you want to submit the PSLF form for every employer you've had since 2007, October 1st, 2007. Only employment starting October 1st, 2007 is going to count towards PSLF. Let me move on to the chat. So is it possible to get correct answers to section 3 for CUNY employees? Questions 9 and 13. I feel that once they start getting these forms, they should be filling them out correctly. But Paul, anything you want to say on that and how like to provide additional guidance to, I think you answered it there.
Actually, I was just looking at a different question. So which question are you referring to?
You answer it in terms of there's a concern that the colleges might not complete the form correctly on some of the questions, but you already answered.
Oh, okay, right. So the other one I was looking at was Demira, the full-time and part-time. And I agree with that. If you have full-time for that period and you don't need the part-time to reach the 30 hours, then you don't, you don't need it. But if you want to play it safe, file both forms. You need a separate form for each organization. And you need a separate form when your hours per week are different for different periods. And let's see, I'm amazed how fast and quickly you can answer all these questions, Carla.
I do this every day.
But I can't remember it all when you do this. So it's unfortunate, but we really don't have the capacity at PSC and our staff to answer your questions. And we really are relying heavily on NICET and EdCap. So please, if you have unanswered questions now, it's 6:09. Then, and also when I've gone through the webinar, I have questions afterwards. Then maybe do it again. But also you can apply for a financial counselor at NICET, and I believe the same with EdCap, right?
Yes, you can reach out to us. I'm going to put the webinar, the EdCap webinar link again, not necessarily for the webinars, but on that page, you can scroll down and it's going to have additional resources, and it includes the PowerPoint presentation we are using for PSLF campaign. It provides a couple of other resources, but there are a couple of resources, which is one pager on who should consolidate, and includes a little video at the end on the one pager that you can click and watch. And then the second one that I use a lot to send to my clients is how to consolidate federal student loans. And that's going to guide you, because if you're doing the consolidation on your own, there's some things or some questions that you might be scratching your head. Like, for example, you're going to select do not delay processing. You're going to select Mojilla as your servicer. You're going to say that you're applying for PSLF. When you get to the income information, you want to look into the income-driven repayment plan. So there's a lot of things that might come up for you that you might be puzzled about. So again, go to the webinar website and scroll down, and there's that one particular one pager that I'll extract here. And it's like how to consolidate your loans. And if you're stuck, just shoot us an email through EdCap, and we can help you out. I missed the year that employment starts to count, 2007. The program started in October 1st, 2007. So you only need to go back that far. If you worked in 2005, that's not going to count. They're only looking at employment records from 2007. Now, if you've been working for the same agency prior to 2007, it's fine. What they'll do on the form, they'll put in the start and end dates, and the government knows that they'll only start counting payments starting October 1st, 2007 until now.
Right. Let's see. There's some, oh, that was you that put stuff in chat. Great. Any more questions? I know some people came late. You can do a webinar with NICET on September 15th. And then if you go to our webpage, the links to EdCap are up there, and other places where you can get resources. And I want to thank PSC CUNY for taking this on. I'm in the legislative committee, and Harvey Epstein is coincidentally, or not coincidentally, my assembly member, and took this on and took the initiative to get this bill passed. And Harvey said if it wasn't for PSC lobbying, he wouldn't have been able to get the votes and passed in time. So, excuse me, I have a cold I'm trying to get rid of. Fortunately, not COVID. I'm going to stop share and see if there's any more questions. I think we're good.
Yeah, so there's what if you have loans at Fed Loan? So if you have loans at Fed Loan and you've indicated that you're pursuing PSLF by submitting at least one form, those loans are going, and literally right now, to Mojilla, meaning in the next few weeks. I think in September there should be like close to being done. So Fed Loan is going to transfer the remaining portfolio to Mojilla. So it's a matter of time, but by now you should have received a letter to that effect. If you're with Fed Loan and you never submitted a PSLF form, I feel you would have already been transferred to another servicer. If you're not sure and you want to reach out, let us know. In terms of the COVID forbearance payments, yes, if you were not making payments because you benefited from the COVID payment pause, those payments or non-payments or that time will count. The only time that they're really not accounting, and this is to simplify things, are in-school deferments and time in default. So if you had loans in default, they're not going to count that time, even if you were working full-time for a qualifying employer. But again, the COVID payment pause, that time should qualify for payments again, unless you were in school and you had your loans in a school deferment.
I actually have a question. I was just looking up to see if my loans were changed, and I was switched to Advantage.
Did you do a consolidation recently?
No, this was
you-
done. I was with Navient before,
Okay.
and I see that they actually sent me something on PSLF from Advantage just a few days ago.
Okay, great. So the next step for you, Paul, is to submit the PSLF forms in order to trigger the loans to be transferred over to Mojilla.
So as soon as I submit a form, okay, got it. Yeah. So
And if you want to have a one-on-one session, I'm happy to do it with you.
No, that's okay. It's funny. This came in while we were doing this. I guess they just sent. Well, anyways, they should have told people a lot earlier. Then this was the last day of August that they sent this, and I didn't notice it. So if other people are on Advantage, that's I guess what's going on.
And one thing not to get people confused about Advantage. So what happened is Navient had what are known as FFEO loans that they still own, and so they kept those. So if you have Navient, you're definitely going to need to consolidate because those are non-direct loans. But they were also managing direct loans that are owned or loans that are owned by the U.S. Department of Education. So they transfer that portfolio over to Advantage. The confusion comes from the fact that Advantage is actually helping Mojilla process the consolidations. So when you do the consolidation, you're selecting Mojilla as your servicer, but a message is going to pop out and it's going to say Advantage is going to be processing your consolidation. So it doesn't help that is happening because it creates a lot of confusion for people who may consolidate and think their loans are going to Advantage, and that is not the case. If you're doing a consolidation and the name Advantage comes up, it's just that they're processing the consolidation. Eventually, your loans will end up with Mojilla. But again, two ways to get to Mojilla. You either select them as your servicer when you do a consolidation, or you file the PSLF form, at least one with one qualifying month, and that will trigger Mojilla to get that form and acquire your loans from whatever servicer you have and then the review for PSLF. Mojilla will continue to manage the PSLF program. So if you're now with that loan but pursuing PSLF and you had a payment count, your loan will eventually be transferred to Mojilla in the next few weeks.
So let me get that correct. So if you have an Advantage loan, even though it's just one direct loan, federal, you would apply for consolidation, or you would file a PSLF form. But then, of course, if you're an adjunct like me, we still have to wait before we can even file. But the first part, I can, even though I only have one loan, can I go through a consolidation process?
If it's already a consolidated loan, no, you cannot reconsolidate an already, unless it's an FFEO loan. You cannot reconsolidate a direct consolidated loan.
Oh, it wasn't.
I want to be,
Wasn't
yeah.
consolidated. It was never consolidated. It was never consolidated. It was just one loan. So
And
that,
it's a direct loan?
yeah, it's a direct federal loan.
You don't need to consolidate. Again, you must consolidate if you have FELP or Perkins loans, right? Like that's a must. And the one pager should, about who should consolidate should help. The only time that we may recommend for people to consolidate if they have direct loans is if they have a lot of loans and they just want to condense them to 2 buckets, subsidized and unsubsidized. They could do that for purposes of managing the loans in the future. Or as I had mentioned before, if you had undergrad loans and then went back to school and you had a payment count that it's going to be different, you can consolidate them now to take advantage of that and have one payment count apply to all the loans.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
And
So
to sorry, Paul, just to the
Sure.
person that said that their loans went to Navient, do reach out. If you just reach out to the EdCap email and say that that's your case and you want to speak to me, my staff will get it to me. Okay, I'm done. I'm not going to talk more.
Okay, great. So this Q&A was just amazing. And it actually kind of substituted for the one-on-ones because of your rapid fire. Oh, I just see one more Q&A, or maybe you, oh, that's, thank you. So thanks again. No open questions. We'll get a recording up when we can, up on the PSLF PSC website. So thanks everybody. And Carolina, you can get a rest, brief rest. But not till after October 31st.
Yeah, there was I think there's a hand raised. Oh, I know we're trying to leave.
Okay.
Danita?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I was a little question. I came late, sorry, but I had a little bit of a question because I think I'm more far along than everybody else. Because I've been through the program for the last couple of years. And so when COVID hit, I have been submitting my yearly update of my salary and that I still work here. So I did it the last time, I did it for this year already. And so I already got my notice telling me that majority of all my payments have been accepted and that I really only have 1 out of the 120 left. But this year is still under the COVID relief. So when will I know about the final payment? Will I really have to make a final payment or will this year be concluded in that 120?
So remember that they can only count payments based on the signature date of the form. So if you still have 1 payment or 3 more payments to go, you would need to submit an updated form counting whatever number of payments you still have left. So for purposes of the payment pause goes all the way to December. So technically you're gonna get this month and the next, October, November, December, the next 3 months. So 4 months from now, but you're gonna have to submit an updated PSLF form for them to know that you you've met the one remaining payment. They won't know that unless you submit the form.
Okay, so I will have to submit another form.
Yes, and in that case, if you're like done, then you can select that you're done, the second box on the form.
Okay, okay. All right. I was just asking because the date that I submitted it was April of 2020.
Oh, you need to submit an updated one.
Oh, okay, okay,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you all. Thank you, Paul, for having me. I think you're muted, Paul.
So Kim, I guess you can stop the recording and, or actually, I guess I can do that.